So how do you work with a team that doesn't know teamwork? And how do you position yourself? How do you make sure that you're as aggressive as possible and as dangerous as possible to the enemies? All of these questions and more we will talk about in this video, about how you can work together with those allies right next to you. So let's talk about killing and surviving.
Lines of fire.
What does it actually mean to have support? Basically what you have to imagine is that in every case you need some line of fire, some line of sight of your allies right towards your position and that of the enemy ahead of you. So what this means is if you are drawing a line between your teammate that is either right next to you or even camping far behind towards your position and that of the enemy ahead of you, then you will have to make sure that the enemy does get punished if he is peeking at you. Some enemies might just go for some YOLO moves that are not healthy for you at all, even if it doesn't make too much sense for them. You cannot really trust on yourself to win a 1v1 because it's always up to the RNG, and everyone above 50% probably has decent enough aiming to not lose out too badly. So make sure that any enemy just doing some weird move is getting punished by at least 2 guns, so you are staying safe then. So always keep these lines of fire in mind, but be aware of obstacles that might just hinder your allies from shooting the enemies. So don't really trust on your teammates to cover you if there is some rock or some building or some hill in between you and your team. Just feel that support of your team in your back, like a warm hand on your shoulder saying, "I got you, bro."
Deadly triangles.
Of course, we're not always trying to stay safe only, so for getting aggressive we have to make sure that we are increasing the angles onto the enemies. We've already talked about this in the last video a little bit. We are talking about enemies or every tank having the strongest side to the front. So in the best case you are having 2 or even 3 tanks available to shoot 1 tank only. In this case there would be no way of this 1 tank hiding perfectly. It doesn't matter if you are fighting at a close distance or at a longer distance. You want to make sure that you are increasing the angles so that you build up this kind of deadly triangle to shoot down the enemy, so that there is really nothing that one can do anymore. Which also means you've got to find those tanks which allow you to do so. Which brings us to the next point.
A chain of pearls.
Basically, a team formation can often be seen as some kind of chain of pearls, as I like to do so in this analogy. This means that a safe formation is basically everyone just being relatively close to another, being able to support each other. But if there is one tank just falling out of this pattern, if there is someone being too aggressive, that is kind of a loose element. Your goal needs to be to steal those pearls without the other ones noticing. So just find those tanks on the minimap. Any enemy that is being too aggressive is a target that you want to kill, and it will be very easy to build up the deadly triangles to pick that one up then. But be aware of campers. Those will not always be spotted, and they might just still somewhat connect that loose element, or that seemingly loose element, to the team a little bit better. But then you might also be able to just get another angle in and still fight that isolated element to the front. The goal is to stay safe of most of the enemies while engaging only one at a time. Be aware that going for the tanks to the flanks will often allow you to stay safer from getting dragged into dangerous crossfire yourself.
Pacing.
And the problem of loose elements is also what brings us to the next point here. And that is pacing, which is so important. The right timing of your positioning, your aggressiveness in the context of your team. Let's take this example. Your teammate is getting way too aggressive and YOLOing straight into the enemies. Or you might just complain and blame him, but what you actually need to do is make sure to make use of that. If that teammate is getting very aggressive, it means that the enemies will turn their guns towards that guy, and you will be able to get some free farm in as long as you're close enough. So what I like to do then, if some teammate is really just going full YOLO, I like to move up almost as aggressively, pick some hull down position right behind and farm down those enemies which are being distracted for a while. So in the best case I get at least as much damage in as my teammate is losing in terms of hit points. Of course that's not granted to work out, and also if your teammate is YOLOing in, you might just also be at such a disadvantage that you would be the next one in line and would rather do well at just backing off early on and making sure to just give up that side before you are going to get killed. On the other hand then, if you are giving up one side, you will likely have to win the other side. Otherwise, you are going to end up just at a disadvantage without having gained anything. So to put this into a broader perspective, If your team is getting aggressive, you also need to be aggressive, otherwise you lose your teammates. If your team is being passive, well, you also have to be passive as well, otherwise you are going to be dead very, very soon. So check the minimap, check your surroundings, and fill out what's like the pacing that your teammates want to go for at any given time. And also be aware of what the pacing of the enemies is, because you might have to adjust your position accordingly to keep a bit of a safe distance in between them and you, or just make sure that you are getting aggressive while they are being passive on the other hand.
Numbers.
All these formations and all that pacing and all that kind of stuff also is being hugely impacted by numbers. And this isn't actually too complicated at all, because everyone's capable of counting up to 7, and that is a very easy thing to do. All you need to do is count the amount of tanks to your front and count the amount of tanks that you are having with you on your side. Mostly we're having 2 sides on any map, so just counting how many tanks are there to the front, how many tanks on your side, allows you to decide on whether you can be more aggressive or whether you have to be more passive. Of course, there are often a lot of tanks still unspotted, so you will have to wait for some information and collect these spots before making any decision and not YOLOing in too early, but then you will be able to do something. Also, if you see on the minimap, for example, that some enemy is spotted on the medium side, like there are 3 tanks on the medium side while you're having 2 tanks there, well, that means you are going to have an advantage on the other side, which allows you to push forwards then, and you will kind of have to push forwards because your 2 tanks are definitely going to die against 3, so you will have to make sure to not be too far behind as soon as your teammates are dead on the other side then. Surely you cannot always just push in anywhere, so you might have to also just camp it out a little bit and farm, and then as soon as you do have the option, still go for that push into any direction where you do sense there is a bit of a disadvantage. Some of this information that I talked about here in terms of positions and numbers is also what you can see right at the start already. For that, please check out my video about lineups right there, otherwise you might be interested in that one. Thanks for watching, this is Nino, goodbye.